Movie called Private Lessons, which was Alan Meyerson directed it. The producers really destroyed what the director wanted. The director wanted a comedy. The producers wanted something salacious. So at a certain point when we had a rough cut, I was one of a crew of three, and I guess the statute of limitations is passed by now. But we broke into and we stole the reels off of the racks. We brought them over to his house. It was on a weekend, I think. Took it to a transfer place. They transferred the film so he would have his own internet, to work with and cut his own film, and then brought it back so that as if no one would notice. And I think we had an insider in the editing department who knew it was going to happen, so they allowed it. But it turned out that when we put the films back, we put them A to Z instead of Z to A or something. We had them back, so it didn't happen without being noticed. But he did get a copy of his film.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast, The Making of Stories. I'm your host, Jawad Mir. Today, my guest is Kevin Hughes. Kevin Hughes is a prop master who's worked on some incredible films over the last several decades, including Apocalypse Now, Boogie Nights, Piranha, and several other more. It was a great pleasure of mine to be talking to him about those films, some of the most incredible stories that he shared that I have never heard before. Lovely guy, great stories, great career, and the pride that he takes in his work is absolutely remarkable. I truly, truly appreciate all the work that he's done in the films that we have grown up with. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Kevin Hughes. If you can just introduce yourself, in terms of your career, where it started and how it started, and the catalyst behind it. That would be a really cool place to begin, I think.
All right. As a child, my everybody in the family has been in show business one way or the other. My grandfather on my mom's side was a cameraman for Paramount for 30 or 40 years, and my grandfather on my dad's side worked the vaudeville circuit in Los Angeles. So the Broadway, the street in Los Angeles, the Broadway had a lot of theaters, which are being renovated now these days too. But he was a prop, grip, and electric. They were all the same thing. He was a stagehand. He came out of the Navy, and a lot of people who came out of the Navy worked stages for some reason. I don't know why. It's where all those nautical terms come from. But so that's grandparents. Then my dad worked at CBS for many years. He was a stage technician, a prop, grip, electric. And he worked, my favorite thing was that when he did props, he often brought things home. He worked on a show called the Soupy Sales Show, and we were asleep, and he got home a weather balloon, a gigantic weather balloon, and filled it in the living room, so that when we came down the stairs to go into the living room, we could see in the room, but we couldn't get in because this membrane was blocking our view. So it was basically surreal, and surrealism and magic kind of combined together to make me want to do nothing other than that. So I pretty much had my mind set on doing something like props since I was a kid. And I put on magic shows and that stuff for the family. I got a job at working for the Smothers Brothers for a time, where my mom worked for them. And then Pat Paulson and his run for presidency in '72. And I became sort of a road manager for him while he was campaigning to be the president. I came back and got into my dad's local film nepotism. Oops, sorry.
That's okay.
And so I worked around the stages in LA for a while. I ended up at CBS, where I worked for 5 or 6 years. This is like from '74 to, well, I don't know, till '79, so '72 to '76. And in '76, I got a call. I was on a long list of people who might be able to drop what they were doing and be a courier for Francis Coppola while he was in the Philippines making Apocalypse. And I was on that list because my sister used to babysit for his kids, and we all lived up in the same neighborhood. And so I was on the list, and somebody said, can you come to the Philippines and bring some wine and cheese and a few movies to brighten up the mood for the guys, because they were exhausted from two or three, almost 2 years of working. So I had this fantastic career job. I asked for a leave of absence at CBS, where I had been working on game shows and soap operas and variety shows. And they allowed me to go. I flew to the Philippines and asked Francis if I could stay. And he asked, if what I wanted to do with it. And I said, well, I'm props in LA. And he said, talk to Doug Madison, the prop man on the movie. So I went over, had a brief conversation. He said, yeah, sure, come on in. So I was at that point, like I say, everybody was burned out on that movie. And so I became like the third assistant props, listed in the screen credits as a production assistant, which was really more like it. But that got me hooked for sure on props, because movie props versus soap operas, it's just, put the same breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the table each time,
Right.
until, but movie props was really something fascinating. So, and watching a pro make what at the time was the most expensive movie ever made, it was kind of mind bending to see what you could do if you had, money and talent around you. And so I was dazzled. But as soon as that movie ended, I was 3 months in the Philippines, and then I worked for a year for the sound department in LA, doing Foley and sound effects. And they wanted somebody. This is crazy too. At the end, when we were doing the sound, they wanted the actual sound when they were doing Foley. So rather than just finding a recording of a Zippo lighter, they wanted to use the Zippo lighter that Marty used in the movie. And if it was newspapers, and there's a dossier scene where he's looking at the dossier and throwing it into the water, Francis wanted the actual page, so that a Xerox page would sound different than a photograph, and that would sound different than a glassine or typewritten page. So I was in charge of the actual props while they were doing the sound effects. And that lasted a year. And right after that, I got my resume had all that TV stuff and Apocalypse Now. And so I went on an interview for Joe Dante for a Roger Corman movie called Piranha. And that was my second film. So from Apocalypse Now to Piranha was a huge jump in concept of what you can do with a budget. I think we had $500 budget on Piranha,
Wow.
not counting the little fish. But and I had a great gig on that too. One of my jobs was to be snorkel and sometimes a scuba tank under the water and holding on to little kids who were inner tubes, and on a cue yanking them through the inner tubes, so that as if a piranha or sharks had eaten them. So I would pull the kid into the water, and somebody else would pump 50 gallons of blood into the water.
Oh, wow.
was,
That's
and it
insane.
was just nothing but enjoyable. I never did a movie, almost never, that I didn't enjoy working on and have a great time doing. So it was that from there to those two movies, and then I filled in what kind of budgets and style from that point on. I didn't work big movies. I worked more smaller crew movies, but they were good movies. I worked on a lot of really great movies. So I
Yeah.
think that's a brief rundown as to how I got started.
Well,
And with
sorry, go on.
well, I was going to say the movies after that were varied, and there were a lot of different kinds. But anytime anybody saw that movie on my resume, they were at least I got a second minute of talk. And another one was when I would show my resume a couple of years later, and I would be kind of cocky by then. I go, I got Apocalypse Now and Piranha on it. And these guys would look at it, these production managers or producers, and say, oh, this is great. We could put you did Teen Wolf? That made a fortune. And it didn't cost a dime to make. So I thought, geez, Teen Wolf, you're looking past Apocalypse here. But so that was a movie that you never know what's going to make you get you a job. But having worked on Teen Wolf was a big thing to a lot of producers. So that was an
Yeah,
enjoyable.
I think Apocalypse was one of those films, even though it had Coppola attached and Brando and Sheen and I mean so many Robert Duvall, it just didn't become what it became after maybe good 7, 8 years later. Like it was a grand film, it was more like a small film at the same time. In
Absolutely.
you can call it indie, right? But Teen Wolf is kind of like I know what you did last summer in the
Yeah.
90s.
Right.
That
Right.
that kind of approach. But you mentioned Piranha, so Piranha 2, I think. You didn't work on Piranha
I
2,
just
right?
I just worked on the Joe Dante one. Yeah.
Yeah, because the second one was, I don't know many people know about this, was James Cameron's first film,
Oh, that's
right?
right. Yeah.
And then
I wish I'd worked on that.
the story behind it too, that he, I think he told it that, I'm sorry, I'm kind of like deviating, but it just kind of
Oh,
reminded me, that how he actually, the producer, I think, or the actor wanted to have their cut and they didn't want to give Jim any access, so he ended up breaking in and stealing the film
oh
and
wow. I've done that.
editing it. You have done that?
I did that with a movie called Private Lessons, which was Alan Meyerson directed it, and it was about a kid. God, it's a weird movie. Uh, the female lead was Sylvia Cristal, who at the time was famous for her films called Emmanuel, and she's the female lead, and a 15-year-old boy is the male lead, and it's about being seduced by somebody, and it's a hijack, kind of like Home Alone in a sense, but with a porn star. And the producers really destroyed what the director wanted. The director wanted a comedy. The producers wanted something salacious. So at a certain point, when we had a rough cut, I was one of the a crew of three, and I guess the statute of limitations is passed by now. But we broke into they were cutting out the Ince studios, I think. I can't remember exactly where. And we stole the reels off of the racks. We brought them over to his house. It was on a weekend, I think. Took it to a transfer place. They transferred the film so he would have his own internet, to work with and cut his own film, and then brought it back so that as if no one would notice. And I think we had an insider in the editing department who knew it was going to happen, so they allowed it. But it turned out that when we put the films back, we put them A to Z instead of Z to A or something. We had them back, so they didn't. It didn't happen without being noticed. But he did get a copy of his film. So yeah, it was
Wow.
a hijacking movie in real life. And I
So
think Cameron must have done that before Private Lessons. I think it must have been a few years before that.
yeah, I think Piranha 2 came in the early 80s, and I think I'm just looking at IMDb. It was around the same time. Private Lessons came in 1981, and Piranha 2 came in 1982. So it was around the same time,
Oh yeah, okay.
more or less.
Okay.
But now that you mentioned, is this like a customary, like a very common thing in
I
Hollywood in
don't
the 80s?
know. Well, maybe in the 80s because
Yeah,
I mean it was everything was filmed. There was no digital yet. So
yeah.
you get something from a work print. I think we ended up probably with the work print. It wasn't going to be able to be released, but Alan wanted to, he was proud of it. We made a fucking funny movie, pardon my language, but I mean, the people who were in that movie are all members of the committee, which was an improv group in LA at the time. They were a lot like Second City, but they were out here. And Howard Hessman was one of them, and it was just, giving those guys a chance to be hysterically funny. Ed Begley
Yeah.
Jr. But no, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think the first. This is sort of connected because of Doty, but the first director's cut that I know of was Gladiator, that he made a movie and then the director's cut came out because no, that's not right. It was the one with Harrison Ford.
Witness?
No, he was. Let's see.
The
They used the
Guard.
old building, the replicant movie. How can I not remember this
Oh,
movie?
Blade Runner.
Blade Runner, yeah. I think
Yeah.
Blade Runner was one of the first movies to have a official director's cut. And I think from then on, people, if they thought they had a good enough movie, you know, but now you get a director's cut, you get 10 weeks after you shoot, you get a 10-week director's cut, and I suppose they could always run off a disc of that if they wanted to, but hard to get
Yeah,
back to
and
doing that.
yeah, I mean things are so different. I mean even now, maybe even 15, 20 years ago, right? Like you can't gone are the days in the 70s and 60s and maybe even 80s like when you could just sort of walk into a studio and now like, now it's like, forget about anything like that. Like it's like
Absolutely.
you not only you have to have proper ID, but you have to be invited, you have to be on some sort of a list and
Yeah,
all that
yeah.
stuff. But I was going through your IMDb and you worked on some of the films that I've sort of seen growing up, Black Stallion, at least that's what IMDb suggests. So please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
There
a
was,
set decorator on that than the props, but that was mostly second
yeah,
unit.
you worked on Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. You worked with Paul Thomas Anderson for Boogie Nights. You Mega Apocalypse Now, um, or many others, which I probably didn't really, and Wedding Planner. But if there is a couple of stories that stand out from any of those films, or any other film that I didn't mention,
Yeah.
that were very intriguing from a story standpoint, directors, actors, anything that you must have gained a lot of experience and knowledge over the years to get to where
Absolutely.
you are today.
Well, one of the smartest directors I've ever worked for is Paul Thomas Anderson. He knows his filmmaking so well that, and not just contemporary. He can go back into the silent films, and he really knows almost everything there is to know about filmmaking and directors in film. And working with him was great. I grew up with a lot of information because, like I say, with three generations of show
Mm,
business, we were conscious of the fact that it didn't just happen. People had to make movies happen. But and with Paul, just every day was interesting, and he and Burt Reynolds had a constant trivia pursuit questions they would ask each other during the day and see if they could stump the other person. But that just was just sort of part of the social life. The technical part, prop wise, on that movie was really, really challenging because we used real cameras when they were shooting. So a lot of the actors, if they were shooting with an actual practical camera with film in it until they went to video, then with video in it. And therefore, the props, as opposed to just being a plastic box that looks like a camera, they had to
yeah.
be real cameras and they had to be working. So again, that's not, I'm pretty good with pretend things, which is why I kind of like the prop department rather than going into, the police force. But so yeah, to keep the things working, we had to have a camera tech within the prop department because, the actors are shooting there's no other way to do that when we have other actors in the same shot than to give them the actual camera. So that was kind of an exciting thing to do. And Boogie Nights, from day one, there was nothing that wasn't fascinating to do on that movie. And I'll tell you one quick thing about actors. People, you know this for sure. When you say you work in show business, people almost always say, "But do you know any actors? Or tell me something about an actor." And I kind of don't because they're just sort of people I work with in a blue collar way. You show me Alice Waters or a fantastic chef, I'll be dazzled and want to autograph. But movie stars, they don't really want you to come up and interrupt them. But oh, I got lost in a tangent. I was going to say an actress who just blew my mind was Julianne Moore in Boogie Nights. Forgive me for that.
Hmm.
She, she, in the movie, she plays an actress, and the actress is not a very good actress. And so the character, who is supposed to be believed as that her character is whatever her name was, and she's an actor, she had to differentiate between acting and being a character who was acting. And everybody on the crew who was able to be on the set stood around and watched her because it's so hard to figure out how to do that. The actress is on the set, the cameras are ready to shoot, and the shot is an actress on the set with cameras ready to shoot. And so she has to be herself in dialogue with the people she's talking to. And then when they say action to the character, she acts poorly. And God, it was just fascinating to see. Nobody could figure it out. It was like something about her voice changing, or she got a little stiffer in her movements, whatever it was. It's really clear. You watch the movie, you will see it really clearly. And William H. Macy, all these people would stand around and watch to see what's she doing? How is she making that happen? I just think that's a masterful acting job that's often constantly overlooked. I mean, yes, she's a great actress, and they say that, but how deeply hard that must be to do that always, kind of freaked me out, I guess is the way to put it. So yeah, that's a Boogie Nights thing. Plus, of course, I was, the body double for Dirk Diggler through a lot of the close-up scenes. No, that's not true. that movie, every day on that movie was great. I saw a lot of great performances. And Ricky Jay, do you know who he is? He's just passed away recently, but a great magician who was famous for, he could throw playing cards across a football field and have him
Oh,
embed into a
yeah, I know who he
throne.
is. I know he is. Yes.
He was, and he's in a lot of David Mamet's movies for some reason. He was on the set and he was playing the cameraman, but everybody knew it was Ricky Jay, so they'd always ask him to do a magic trick if he had the time. And he did close-up magic. He had a deck of cards, as any decent magician will have a deck of cards close by at any time. And he did tricks that were just kind of amazing to watch. As you're on the job and there's a magician in front of you. How often does that happen in somebody who's like, an architect? Those things don't happen very often. So anyway, it was great to learn magic, a little bit of magic from him. And when I worked on Masked and Anonymous, the Bob Dylan fiasco movie, he he asked me at one point if I could teach him some magic tricks. I don't know how he knew. I think maybe I just did something with magic, but he asked me if I could teach him a few tricks that he could perform in front of his grandchildren. Because I said, "You have a lot of them?" He said, "I got 12 so far." And every day or every once in a while, if I was standing between takes, I'd show him something. And it's really the, pull a quarter from the ear thing, or, any of those goofy magic tricks. But he loved learning them. And I think he enjoyed being able to go home that night and do a trick for his grandchildren before wherever he saw them. But that was magic another time in the movies. And also I'm sorry, I'm really going all over the place with
No, no,
this.
no. This is lovely. I love it. I love it.
All right. When that Bob Dylan movie, Masked and Anonymous, it's a long movie, it's it's a road picture. Dylan gets out of jail and he works his way to trying to put on a concert to save the world. And it's in a dystopian near future. And when movie's a movie, it was hard work, but great actors. Giovanni Ribisi played one day and was just insanely brilliant in it. You watch that movie, just for actors, for each scene they do, it's great. Whether it holds together altogether, I'm not sure, but I love it as a movie, and I loved watching it be made. And so we shoot the movie about the prison break and all that. And at the end of the movie, of shooting the movie, we had 4 days of concert footage because he's going to put on the concert, and it was shot on a huge sound stage with nobody there except the crew, and 2 or 3 jib arm cameras and a handheld, and the crew of maybe 18 or 19 people, and Bob Dylan and a band of 4 people playing for 2 days of constant music, 4 days overall. And I just got to sit on the stage with my prop box standing by if they need the harmonica back, and watch Bob Dylan play music for days. And they were paying us money to do that, which is just astounding to think that we had that opportunity. Every day was amazing to me. I guess you're getting the idea that I enjoyed my job while I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
there. So yeah, that was a great one. Bob, at the end of the movie, there's also in the movie, I think Jeff Bridges kills somebody smashing a guitar over their head. So we had to buy like 20 replica exact matched guitars and score them so that they would be, breakable. If you could predict where and how it would break. So I think we went through 8 of the 10. We must have had at least 10. It's my usual number that had been smashed and done. And at the end of the movie, we had 2 left, and Larry, the director, wanted one of them, and I got the other one. And I asked Bob Dylan's handlers if they thought he would sign that for me. And they said, no, he doesn't really do signatures, autographs, because it really hurts his feelings when 2 days later he sees it on eBay to be
Yeah, yeah.
to be sold. He says it really irritates him. And I said, okay. I said, well, how about if he signs his character's name on the guitar? And they said, well, I don't know. See him, talk to him, see what he says. So I went into his trailer, and we knew each other pretty well by then. And so I asked him if he would do it. I said, you don't have to do your own name, but Jack Fate would be fine. And he said, yeah, okay, that'll be fun. So he writes to Kevin, thanks for the instructions. This is a real blind lemon guitar. Thanks for the instructions, Bob Dylan. And he was absent-minded enough to forget that he wasn't supposed to sign his own name. So I do have a guitar, a breakaway guitar signed by Bob Dylan, which, believe me, will not go on eBay if you're listening, Bob. That's a fantastic, one of my favorite things, souvenirs from movies. I don't have a lot of those, but
That's
that,
awesome. That's
that,
awesome.
and I also have, I think I sent it to you a couple minutes ago. I also have Francis Coppola's Chairback from Apocalypse.
Yes. Yes.
At a certain point, he kind of shouted to the world. That was how he worked. He'd say, could I get a glass of water? Whoever the glass of water department is, could I get that? And he at one point said, "Can somebody get me a chair back that doesn't say Francis Ford Coppola? It seems so pretentious. I want one that
Yeah.
just says Francis Coppola." And I said, "Okay, I'll see to it." And I grabbed the chair back and put it on my bag on the prop boat, and kept it. And he got his new one in there in less than 24 hours because the Filipino crew workers there were so amazing. They could build, you've seen the sets. Those are sometimes some of these totem poles and statues were made overnight with a crew of 30 guys all sitting on this foam rubber and carving something out like it was on fire. And then 2 hours later, there it is, a perfectly done and painted set. So yeah, didn't take long to get new things from there once I got to the Philippines. So yeah,
Amazing.
now let me see a couple of movies. I'm trying to think. Oh, what great experience was Dead Man, the Jim Jarmusch movie with Johnny Depp. And that was a road picture for us. We went from Mexican border to top of Oregon. And we would shoot a couple of days here and a couple of days there, then pack up like a circus or caravan, move to the next town a little farther up. And, we were a caravan, but doing that, and it was sort of fascinating to do. But during that time, I had a dog. I was driving my own little camper car that had, the prop truck was its own truck, but I drove to the location and drove from location to location with my dog, whose name was Blaze, because she was rescued from a Topanga Canyon fire. And she was on set all the time, was always around me. Everybody loved her. And at one point, we had this beautiful set of a bedroom set with cut paper flowers on it, and it was elegant and a hot set when we broke for lunch. We go to lunch, and when we come back to shoot, Blaze was asleep on that bed, having squished a bunch of the flowers, but just sort of kind of just sound asleep, hanging out. And I was humiliated. I just thought, oh my God, I promised that she wouldn't do anything bad, and this was the worst thing. A hot set ready to shoot, and we have to wait. And I said, let me get her. And he said, Jammer said, no, don't wake her up. We'll find something else to shoot. What else have we got? And they go, rather than wake up my dog, Jim decides he'll find something else to shoot until the dog wakes up. And that's just, you don't see that with directors very often. If they don't get their way, they're
Yeah.
usually upset. But Jim I would work, I told people this, it never happened, but I would work for Jim Jarmusch for free anytime. It was just so pleasant. He's such a nice guy. And, but I guess he never heard that because he hired other people for his other movie. But he comes out of New
And
York, so I wasn't always available for that. So,
yeah.
uh,
You're clearly, as you said, and it's visible, you enjoyed what you did and what you do. Um, but there's always times at any work where things go wrong and you might get yelled at or you might get screamed at or
oh yeah.
F-bombs here and there. Anything that stands out where, whether it was your mistake or whether it wasn't, and how that sort of unfolded, whether it was like a senior prop department or whether it was a director, which I don't know if the director ever dealt with you directly because of the chain of command, but anything of that kind of sort would be really great to hear.
Well, the movie, like I said, the movies I've worked on have been pretty small, and the director would talk to the crew members.
Okay.
We were all on first name basis all the time.
Okay,
So if
good,
I
good,
made a
good.
mistake, he would talk directly to me. And I can think of one, let's see, well, let me see. There are times when things go wrong that almost went wrong. Oh no, I'll tell you when. It's not necessarily me, but Mike Figgis on the movie Lieberstrom, about an architect who's infatuated with another architect's wife, and also infatuated with steel buildings. And there's only a few made, and one scene in it was the first time they open up the doors to a previously shut building, a department store that's been closed for 50 years. And this is the first time they've walked into it since then. So there's still some mannequins on it. They're all full of dust. And so you really have to walk very, very carefully so as not to raise dust. And Mike Figgis always liked a quiet set. He sort of was the Clint Eastwood kind of director who really wanted quiet. And we were in there and we're wearing particle masks because this dust is everywhere. And we got to a certain point where we're about to shoot and it's, quiet on the set, quiet everybody. And we weren't rolling. He was waiting until he could have quiet. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm still here. No, it's quiet. Come on, quiet down, you guys. And still, he wasn't going to roll. And he said, somebody in here is breathing. Who's breathing in here? And he actually meant it. The sound of breathing. And who's breathing in here? Somebody's in here is breathing. Just sort of sets him aside as a person who really does like a quiet set. So that was an anger thing. I don't know whether, we've run. So the saddest story of show business in a long while was on Rust. I didn't work on Rust, but the movie where the cinematographer was killed with a gun that went off just recently. And
Oh yeah, yeah, the Alec Baldwin film.
yeah, I was never been so angry about movies since I started working them. That was able to happen. So many things had to not have been done that are almost, are always done. You never leave a gun on the set without a gun handler being right next to it. You never put live ammunition in a gun ever on a set, ever on a movie. Even in a truck, you wouldn't have live ammunition. You never walk away, you go to lunch and leave a gun out for anybody to pick up and use. It's just, there's so many rules of gun safety that were not followed everybody was at fault, and I'm not singling out somebody, but, it comes down to the prop man who, should not have had a gun there without being standing on it. And that's just heartbreaking, but it did make me think. I was in New Mexico. That movie was shot in New Mexico, and we were doing a movie called, what was it? Maybe it'll gotta come to me too. But we were running out of blanks, and we had full load blanks, but we're shooting in this ravine, and so it was making so much noise, the full loads, that we used quarter loads, which is a shell for a shotgun, for example, with 3/4 the amount of gunpowder, or half or a quarter is how they differentiate those shells as blanks. And so became my job to, as fast as possible, empty the gunpowder out of the shells and put in only a quarter instead of a half or a whole load. You really shouldn't do that. That's not how it's done. Those are manufactured on a lathe, and experienced people doing it in a closed environment. And for me to be up on the prop truck, poking a hole in a shotgun shell, shaking out the gunpowder and taping it closed to fit back into the gun, was begging for it to jam and something to go wrong. Nothing did go wrong, but when Rust came out, it just reminded me again of just how dangerous that was and how terrible thing could have happened if we hadn't been lucky and careful and lucky. So let's see, that's that. And again, I've worked on the danger thing of Freddie Got Fingered, a Tom Green movie. Well, there was by the way, the production designer on the movie, almost all these except Apocalypse, was the same production designer, Bob Zimbicki, who was kind of my boss. He was, as a production designer, he was the one who would hire a prop department or a prop master, and then I'd hire the crew. And we did a lot of movies together, and we're really still really, really good friends. And we worked together a lot, and we had a ball doing that. I just didn't want to, I needed to drop his name because my jobs,
Sure.
I had all those jobs without Bob, so, but, he was on that film too, and he was a witness to my terrible behavior on that. So, yeah, that's it, that movie, let's see, I think, again, I warned you that I would wander aimlessly off to,
No, no, no.
I think
This
I'm
is
weaving like Trump does.
no,
So,
no, 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 no. You're not. It's all organic, right? And sometimes when you're talking organically, things come up, and that's just the way we all communicate.
yeah,
Um,
okay.
It doesn't look good on Trump because he's the president, and but but going to your career. Um, I've had your wife Dodi, who's been on the podcast, and
Yeah. We
you
went to
guys. I
high
don't
school
think.
together.
Oh, awesome! Do talk about that. How did that work?
Well, she was a couple years,
If that's not personal, I don't normally ask those questions, but I'll leave.
I often say, we went there, but she was in a different grade. I often tell people, she was just a child when I was there. She's a couple years younger, but she was a friend of my sister's as well. And at Hollywood High, I knew her, and we'd hang out together at lunch with a kind of a gang of, hippie types that were working. In most high schools, the groups sort of congregate in various places, like, the jocks are in the quad, and the theater people are over by the auditorium, and the hippies were all up on the front lawn. And this is the front lawn, Sunset Boulevard and Highland Avenue, which is right in the middle of Hollywood. And in 1968, 69, 70s, it was a wild world. And Dodie was among the friends who were going on field trips into the canyons on the weekend, or sometimes we'd go to UCLA to watch the student films that the UCLA students would put out every couple of weeks. And so she was in groups with us. We'd go together. We never had an actual date, the two of us going someplace on our own, but we were friends. We had a lot of good times. And then high school ended and everybody went their own ways, and the end, until my 50th birthday, and my sister arranged for Dodie to be not a surprise guest, because she asked me if I would want to have anybody, a special guest at my birthday. And I mentioned her because her name had been up recently in the paper. Had edited Memento. So I saw her name, went, oh, wow, she must live in town. See if you can find her. And so Dodie was invited and thought something was odd about that, having not spoken for 30 years. But she came, and she was a good sport. And there's a great photograph of us seeing each other for the first time in 30 years. And 6 months later, we were married. So it is kind of a fairy tale story.
Wow.
And that's 22 years ago. So we had a great time. We have been crazy in love since that day. And we kind of,
That's
I wrote her a note, a kind of a Dear John letter, an unintended, an uninvited Dear John letter, by saying, I gotta move out, and I can't give the best unless I've got room to move, which was a John Mayall song. And I drew a picture. This is toward the end of of high school days. And I drew a picture of a bird in a cage with a tear in its eye, to indicate, very clever graphics in my mind, a sad person being in a cage. And then if that wasn't enough, I also then parallel drew a picture of a man, or I guess it was a hand, with a wedding ring on, and a tear in that person's eye, or something like that. It was like, 17-year-old bad poet drawings. And to say, it's just as bad to be a bird in a cage as to be a married man or something. And she saved it. And on that date, 30 years later, she showed it to me, and it cracked me up to think, first of all, that I would have ever written something as lame as that. But secondly, she hung on to it for all those. She also hung on to my draft card, which was, at the time, I could have, it was the law in the States, you had to be in possession of your draft card at any given time. Somebody could come up, like ICE now, could come up and say, show me your draft card, to any person of fighting age. And also they did it because there was a lot of people burning their draft cards at the time. So I looked it up and found out that it was, if you had a replica of your draft card, it was okay. You didn't have to have your real one, but you had to have something to show your status in the military. And so we made a lot of copies of our draft cards so that when we were burning them in public, we'd still have one in our pocket, which would mean we couldn't be arrested. We just, maybe for littering, but not for subversive acts like January 6th. So she had one of the copies of my draft card, which she saved, again, for 30 years. And it was in pristine condition, there it is. And I think our second date was a couple of days later, and we went to a coffee shop in Brentwood area. And she said, she mentioned, or I talked about her saving that thing. She just, said, I kind of saved that kind of stuff, whatever it was. And I went to get it, to show it to her, to look at it again, to see if it was the original or if it was the copy. And I couldn't find it, and I lost it the night she gave it to me, I lost it. So she had it for 30 years, and it didn't matter, it didn't even pertain to her. I had it for 30 minutes and lost it. So that's a kind of a difference between Dodie and me as far as the
That
skills we
that
have.
that's such a cool story. I mean, in those 30 years, did you ever think about the fact that this was, not that it would happen, that you wish it had, or you wish at some point it
Well,
does?
her name is Dodie Dorn. It's just such a great name. It's like it
It's
should be.
almost like a fairy tale name, like from movies like Willow or Lord of the Rings, or
Exactly. And so, I mean, her name came up because my sister, like I say, they were good friends during the high school days, and I don't think that it crossed my mind that I should find her and marry her like they do or whatever. But
yeah.
it was pretty much both of us. I don't think she thought twice about me either in those 30 years. But it turned out that it was well worth it. I think we would not have been married still had we gotten married then, because neither one of us had the phrase, we hadn't sown our oats. We hadn't finished growing up yet. And so
Yeah.
to come into the world at 17 or 18 and try to make it last or make it work, who knows what
Much
could,
harder, much
a lot of
harder.
things could go wrong.
Yeah, and when you were, like you said, you were 50, so I mean, at that point, you're pretty much at the peak of your maturity, and
Yeah.
you like let go of those silly things and all that. So that is so cool. I did not know that. That is so
Okay, I didn't
cool.
know whether, I listened to the thing the other day, your podcast with her, and I wasn't thinking about listening for that information, but,
No, I normally never ask personal stuff. Like I never do. Dodi and I, when we met, like in person, it's different. Like you can talk about certain things.
sure,
But
yeah.
if somebody wants to volunteer that information, I'm all for it. But it's not my cup of tea. I'm more focused on people's career and stuff.
Right.
But thank you for sharing that. I truly appreciate it.
Sure, sure. And I'm not admitting to any of those murders that they accused me of doing, so I didn't.
So in your career, are you still working on projects?
No, I'm
Or are you
retired.
retired?
I tell people, and I'm not sure if it's true, but I'm pretty sure it's true, just by my observations, is that other than the stunt people, prop people are the most injured crew members on a movie. There's always something
Really?
going on. I mean, you have to be, underneath the horse and handing
Yeah.
things. Uh, I've been in a couple of rodeo movies, and one where I tore my rotator cuff because I was running, literally running away from stampeding cattle or calves in a ring. And I whooshed and I ran as fast as I could and kind of did a stunt, one arm on the fence and fly my body over to the other side. It looked great, but I just ripped my shoulder up in doing it.
Ooh.
And also running up and down, other departments don't really need to run. They get their cable out and they get, the lamps are pretty close and they're lit by the time they're ready to shoot. It's not, something doesn't happen very often with the camera department or the lighting department where they say, quick, put another lamp up there. Unless, we're losing light or something, but it's
Sure.
usually we can work at a regular pace. Props, something goes wrong or the actor wishes it to be something else, things have to change quickly, like between takes, run to the truck, run up to it, get something, find something that might work for that, run back, jump down on the tailgate, onto the ground and back to the stage. A lot of running, a lot of jumping, climbing up onto the tailgate of these big trucks. And, sometimes you don't make it and you bash your shin into the lift gate. And there's just constant injuries in the prop department, even when you're careful. And I'm not very careful, but be
That
careful,
makes
people.
sense. That
Yeah, I
makes
think it's
sense
like,
now. Yeah.
that's why I
But
don't, like I say, I don't know for sure, but it seems like, once in a while, other departments get something like something's a cut or there's a thorn in their eye or they cut their fingers and stuff, but we're always getting, just trashed somehow. So
well,
it
even
takes a
even
toll.
yeah, even for stunt coordinators, stunt men or stunt women, I think not up until like maybe I would say maybe I'm wrong. In the early 90s or mid 80s, there were the audience was told that what a stunt person is. Before that, I don't think that concept was there in terms of public's eye. So when you're not informed, you don't know, whether that does it or not. I mean, Tom Cruise obviously has taken it to another level now. Like he's just like,
Yeah,
stunt person. But I think it makes sense. And with the prop industry, you've been in it since the mid 70s and leading up to, in the last 10, 15 years. What has changed for better and for worse in your department over
yeah.
the last few decades?
Well, I used to say, this is when it was only in theory, that, they might use AI and green screen and all those things in the future, and all the actors will just be there and everything will be fake. And I never really believed that because actors, they need to have those things in their hands. They have to have a gun. You can put something that's a rubber gun in their hand and they'll change it in post to a ray gun or a science fiction thing. But it's not going to be that they just stand there doing nothing and acting and animators put the rest of the stuff in because the actors would insist on, I got to carry my briefcase. I can't just have nothing in my hand. I'm not a mime. I'm trying to act. So I think the dogs might bark in a minute. That I was always saying that, they'll never replace prop department in the industry, in the film industry. And I kind of think it's probably still true, but there's a whole lot less of actual, manufacturing of props. A lot of things are done by AI now
Yeah.
that didn't used to be. So I
But at
worry
the
about that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, I think one of the things that you said was, which is true, like actors, I mean, need that space, not just even holding an object, but the surroundings that they're in. And you could
Sure.
tell in movies where they're like, I haven't really seen superhero movies, but I've seen some behind the scenes where
Yeah.
like it's 360-degree green screen
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everything is happening, and you could tell, like, not you can't tell, but you can't get yourself immersed into that environment, and that's how you
Yeah.
can tell.
I think
And
that's
I think
exactly right.
and James Cameron is a great example of that. I don't know if you've seen Avatar behind the scenes stuff. So to even have that, the famous bird sequence. I'm really bad with the names of the,
Yeah, me too.
whatever. They actually made a plastic thing where they sat on it, and it
Yeah.
had hydraulics and it moved back and forth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously, then they replace it because you need that for actors to be fully involved into the
Sure.
character and for the audience to
Yeah.
be engaged.
Yeah. Yeah. I had not John, Scott Glenn on a rodeo movie. He was actually also in Apocalypse Now, and it's almost entirely cut from the movie, but he's in Apocalypse also. But we were doing a rodeo movie, and he was a bull rider, and he's not a bull rider, and he was the first person to tell us that. And so we did a lot of shots with a double on the bull, but a lot of times we had those, country bar fake bull, on the set that he would sit on and, so that he was being thrown around, but not on a real bull in a real, arena. And I don't think we could have gotten any kind of facial performance from him if it wasn't like that, if he wasn't in danger of being thrown or, so even that, it was, it's kind of a prop, I suppose, the bull, but I think it was really operated by the animal trainers at the time on that movie. And yeah, you wouldn't want to, have to be the director to say, imagine that you're being thrown and on the fifth throw, you get tossed off. That's, no actor wants that.
Yeah.
The rapport with actors, I really, enjoyed that part of the movie business to see good actors working. I'm sorry, we're still trying to talk about things going wrong and damaging.
No, no, that's fine.
No, no, what isn't or is not going to be replaced. Yeah, I feel, Jody and I often say, in terms of the prop department, it's good that I'm done with that. It's not as exciting, it's not as romantic, it's not as thrilling as it used to be. Because again, there's so many restrictions and rules that, and budgets are high enough now that you don't have to put something together with spit and glue. They expect it to be, done, manufactured. 3D printers, for example, there's something. Antiques can be made, overnight on a 3D printer that most of the time in prep on a movie, especially period movies that I love doing, you got to shop around and find that, very camera, for example, that was used in 1956 or the difference in, anything. They can now just create those. So even if it's not green screen, it's nothing that the prop department has to do other than, indicate what it should be, and then designers make that happen. So
Yeah.
that's kind of sad but efficient, as long as, and people, I think, which is also sad, don't care if it's a real or fake. I mean, again, you're in the sci-fi things, everybody knows they're not on dragons, but they don't care. It's okay with an audience that it's pretend. I like, I love shopping for the right thing, the right watch that's on an actor, or those things. I guess that's still done, and maybe wardrobe does a lot of it, but it does seem to be
Yeah.
disappearing.
I mean, I agree with you, and I think there's just something about an actual authenticity of an object or a prop, and it just, even if it's like, somebody wearing a watch from the 1950s, even if it's not in like a close-up or it's not, it still sends off that message. Detail, right? So everything is in fine detail. That's all it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And if
Everything
you
is
look
neatly.
on IMDb about movies and it says like bloopers or trivia, a lot of times it'll say something like, that watch didn't come out until summer of 1958.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
This is something
yeah.
before that. Kind of maddening to do. Apocalypse has got a lot of continuity errors in it that either you don't care or you don't notice, but not because it was a mistake that was made. There were Bibles this thick of scene by scene what the PBR of that boat was supposed to look like. In other words, from up to scene 0 to scene 25, it was a pristine condition. Then there was an attack, and they had to use palm fronds to make shade over the top of the canopy. And then later, there's bullet holes in this, and the surfboard is there at a certain point on, and after a shootout, the surfboard's gone. So a lot of those things happen, and we were meticulously careful. And the script supervisors were really great at, oh, hang on, this thing should be a little bit farther over here. And then in editorial, Francis goes, well, it'd be a lot better if this happened before that, you could build something up to it. And so the continuity was, for the sake of the story, was moved
Thrown
around.
off. Yeah.
And so people will say, those idiots, they made a mistake that, the candle is half down and then the candle's back up. And that's because a line of dialogue was more interesting earlier in the conversation. And they're not going to say, well, now, of course, that's an additional thing. You could raise the length of a candle anytime you want in VFX, rather than knowing that the candles are all burning down in sequence to the rest of the scene. So yeah, I guess that's one of the positives that VFX can do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, no, this is awesome, Kevin. I mean, anything else if you want to add on, feel
Yeah.
free to. I think I was fascinating hearing your story, especially your personal story.
Well, yeah. Well, my dad, speaking of personal stories, was the guy who, there was a TV show called the Soupy Sales Show. I don't know if you ever saw it, but that was a show where pies were thrown a lot on TV, and he would bring a bunch of those things home from time to time. But let's see, if my dad. Oh, and there was also, people now have seen it because of YouTube. Groucho Marx had a TV game show called You Bet Your Life, which is kind of a funny idea to think that that's the wage. And if you said the secret word, a duck would fly down from the rafters with that word on it, and the contestant who said it accidentally would win an extra prize. So my dad had a job when they were shooting that show here. Most of the time they shot it in New York, but when they were shooting here, his job was to stand by at the fly rail, and somebody would say, he said the word, a toaster, go. So my dad would be the guy to pull a rope that would bring the duck into the shot. So
Really?
fly in the duck is a statement that you don't hear very often, but my dad had to be that person. And one other
Wow.
big thing, my grandfather on his side, also when I was a kid, his job was to open and close the curtains at the Chinese theater, the Grauman's
Uh,
Chinese.
Chinese
And
man's theater?
yeah, and
Yeah.
he'd be back behind the screen, and he'd sit in a chair reading a book or carving something out of wood, and a little yellow light would come on, and he'd get up and stand over by the switch, and when the green light flashed, he would push a button, and that would close the see-through curtain, and then it would go solid, and that would close the solid curtain, and the audience would then leave, and then the new audience would come in, and the reverse would happen. He'd open the big curtain, and then he'd open the see-through curtain, and then sit down for another hour and a half. So
Wow.
that was his gig when I was a kid, and I thought, I want that job. That'd be kind of cool. I still haven't done it, but that would be kind of a great
But
job.
I will say this that, you have, I don't want to call it hierarchy, but let's just say, like, in the eyes of the world, like everybody sees a film, they see actors, right? That's their
Yeah,
first
they don't
first
think
thing.
that.
Yeah. They don't think beyond that. But then, if you look at like directors or producers or composers and all that, for them, not all of them, but some of them may not look beyond that, right? So there's all the other technicians
Yeah,
that are pretty much making all the crew and department's job a lot easier. It's not just one person doing it. And the point that I'm trying to make is that it's people like yourself who do make everything else look a lot bigger and better. Actors have their job, directors have their job, all of them, but it's just again the fine details which comes through
yeah.
people like yourself. So
And
really
and
appreciate that.
making it believable. That's I think
Exactly.
what it comes down to. Yeah, it's great to be able to do. Can I tell you one quick story? The last
Sure.
story.
Yeah,
Emilio
absolutely.
Estevez is a friend. I met Emilio when he was maybe 11 years old or younger, because when Marty had his heart attack in the Philippines, rather than send him home, which they thought would be a guarantee that Francis would not be able to finish the picture, they were going to send him home and make it with what you've got. So he, as you know, in Hearts of Darkness, they kind of didn't want the States to know anything if they could help it. So they brought his family out. After he got to the hospital, he was there, his whole family was there, and they'd go on and hang out. And if they wanted to play catch, Emilio or Charlie would come up to the prop boat at the time and say, you're gonna bit and balls? I said, yeah, hang on, I'd give them, so that they'd play, and at the end of the day, they'd bring their, sporting goods back to us. But that was my introduction to Emilio. And later on in life, he began to direct a movie, and he directed quite a few movies. And when Bobby was being made, well, first of all, there's another movie called Men at Work, where he and Charlie play garbage men, and it's kind of a weekend at Bernie's.
I think I know which one that is. Yes.
And when I met him to interview for the job, I said, we actually met before. And he said, oh, really? Where? I said, well, on Apocalypse, you came out to the Philippines. I was the guy on the boat that would give you the mitt and ball. And he went, oh my God. And I said, I don't know. I don't know if I can hire you thinking that you're, I said, look, you're directing. There's no rules here. It's not because I'm older than you. So you're gonna run into that a lot of people who are gonna be older than you and more experienced than you. But you're the boss. You're the director. It's okay. So he hired me on that. We worked several movies. And I was going to say about Bobby, and I forget what it was, but oh yeah, we were. It turns out on the movie about Robert F. Kennedy's last day in life and where he was at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles.
Mm.
And the movie is about everything that was happening around him. You only saw him briefly in one moment, but it's like Grand Hotel. You follow the cooks and the chefs, and you follow some of the guests and all these things that are happening. And at a certain point, all through it, there's a Kennedy paraphernalia, bumper stickers and hats and all that stuff, because we've got a huge scene with extras that are throwing their hats in the air and doing all that. And I was shopping for props, and I almost never done it because you can't trust the postage, the postal service. But you're shopping on eBay, the chance of it not getting to you in time, it was just too stressful. So you try to have to go and find something physical that you could take, and we have. But there was a few things that were unique that I found on the internet, and it was the bidding time was before we started to shoot. So I would put in a bid and then keeping an eye on it and then add whenever I needed to. And it started to get pretty expensive, but it was, can't remember the specific prop. I think it was Ambassador Hotel related, not Bobby Kennedy, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we finally got it, and we had a production meeting, and I kind of held it up at the production meeting saying, I think you can like this is a cool one. And I hold the prop up, and he said, oh, God, I was trying to get that. I kept bidding and bidding, and he and I were bidding against each other for a prop on a movie that, he didn't know I was bidding. So he was actively involved in raising the cost of that prop. Whereas if we'd been, talking to each other, we could have gotten it a lot cheaper by only one of us bidding. But that's shopping for props, I guess is what I meant for that.
Yeah. No, Emilio Estevez, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of his films, but I became very aware of his work and his skills in The Mighty Ducks. And
Yeah,
when that came out in the mid 90s, I mean, it was a big deal back then. Like that kind of started the trend of like sports films,
yeah,
I
right.
think,
It's
and it
true.
was super, and it was a super hit. But yeah, I mean, Charlie Sheen, Martin Sheen, what was that TV show, The West Wing?
West Wing, yeah.
Right,
Martin,
right.
great.
Emily, amazing,
Yeah,
amazing stuff. But yeah, no, thank you for sharing all that. And I think
it's a
it's
pleasure.
a it's a testament to your work. And there's no, you know, some people do think that, but I truly believe, if there is such a thing as small jobs, they are the biggest jobs there are because they make everybody else those jobs easier. So thank you so much.
You bet. And keep in mind, it's a blue collar job. It's like other people have. It just happens to have crazy things involved.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, sir. Bye. Bye-bye.